President Donald Trump is now reeling from what was clearly his worst week as president, which is quite a low point for a man who's lived through a steady march of scandals, indictments, and convictions of people around him. But this week marked a rebuke by the majority, a rebuke that the majority of presidents have never faced, a full House floor vote teeing up impeachment. Now, why is this time different? One reason is the evidence. Unlike allegations of self-dealing or hush payments or obstruction in the Mueller probe, the simple facts at the center of this Ukraine bribery plot are not in dispute. Trump demanded a foreign government go after Joe Biden. Trump admitted it. Trump released notes proving it. Trump said he'd do it again, publicly suggesting other countries go after Biden. And as the evidence mounted, several other Trump officials corroborated everything I just said. That's confirmation from the people who work for him. And that's the evidence that got Congress to this point, teeing up impeachment with these new rules that will bring some of those same witnesses into the public. These are now going to be open hearings as mandated in the new resolution. That's the very thing Republicans had claimed they wanted.
All right, people. Jack here, something big just broke. Trump's entire cabinet is facing coordinated removal. Our false no such mass impeachment effort exists. The narrative is spreading confusion, but the reality is far less dramatic and more procedural. Understanding the difference between filings and actual removal is essential. A coordinated impeachment of Trump's entire cabinet, but no such unified removal process exists. The claims are crafted to provoke outrage, not reflect reality. The administration is not on the verge of collapse. But here's where things get complicated, and where the gap between viral sensation and constitutional reality becomes a yawning chasm that millions of viewers are being led to ignore. The truth, as it so often does in the age of viral misinformation, is far more nuanced than the dramatic headlines suggest.
By golly, if they're going to do it in public.
They're trying to impeach a president in secret behind closed doors.
We're going to go and see if we can get inside. Let's see if we can get in.
Let's see if we can get in. Spoiler alert, you can get in. Republicans that you saw on screen there were actually authorized under the old rules to get into those hearings. The new impeachment rules will also let the president in to object to evidence, to cross-examine witnesses. Speaker Pelosi says it's the fairest process any House has ever presented for impeachment.
These rules are fairer than anything that have gone before in terms of an impeachment proceeding.
We turn now to experts who can go in-depth, kicking off our Sunday night special. Harvard's Jennifer Taub, a law professor, author, and expert on white-collar crime. NYU's Melissa Murray, a law professor and former clerk to then-Judge Sotomayor. And from the New York Times Magazine, Emily Bazelon, an author and fellow at Yale Law School. Good evening to all of you. Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you, Ari.
It's great. I want to start here at the table. Emily, what does it mean procedurally?
And understanding what actually happened requires a careful examination of the facts, the constitutional processes involved, and the deliberate manipulation of information that has transformed a series of individual political actions into what appears to be a coordinated assault on the entire Trump administration. What we're witnessing is a masterclass in how real congressional actions can be twisted and combined to create a completely false narrative. How the distinction between filing articles of impeachment and actually impeaching someone can be deliberately blurred, and how individual efforts against different cabinet members can be presented as part of a single unified movement. The story begins with a series of completely separate and unrelated congressional actions.
Now that you've had the House go forward?
It means that we have this new set of rules. And the most important part of these rules, I think, is that we're going to have these public hearings. We're going to all get to hear and assess for ourselves what these witnesses have to say, what their credibility is like. And the president will have lawyers present, whoever he wants, who can cross-examine those witnesses. And this is the classic way in which we try to establish the truth in a dispute in court in this country.
That's exactly right. And I think, again, the key question here is this is a set of proceedings for the people. So the people will now have the opportunity to hear this evidence. And I think one of the things that's really going to be important here is when they hear this evidence, they're going to understand that a lot of the procedures that were used in this White House were serious deviations from what has come before, that these were career people, career administrators who were alarmed by some of the actions that this White House took with regard to this foreign power. And I think that will bring home what the Democrats are trying to hammer down right now.
Yeah, and Jennifer, when you look at this in the criminal context of things that are alleged that the House is looking at that would be potentially high crimes by the president, sooner or later he has to speak to that. This week seemed to shift.
That when viewed individually, represent routine political activity in a divided Washington. Representative John Larson, a Democratic congressman from Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District, announced that he had filed articles of impeachment against President Trump himself, focusing specifically on the president's conduct regarding Iran and what Larson characterized as serious risks to national security. This filing, which came after months of criticism from Democratic lawmakers about the president's foreign policy approach, represents a continuation of the pattern we've seen throughout the Trump presidency, of opposition lawmakers using the impeachment mechanism as a political tool to express their profound disagreement with presidential actions.
His emphasis, because he said, well, we got to get off process and defend what I did. Of course, that might be harder than it looks. Here's how he has been defending that. Take a listen.
There was no quid pro quo. There was nothing.
That call was perfect. It couldn't have been nicer.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. Likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens.
You have to ask Rudy those questions. Don't ask me.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you.
Jennifer, does the House impeachment hearing stage of this process push him and his team past what he's been doing, which are those kind of vague redirects?
You know, I hope so. What we just heard there was clearly impeachable conduct, as well as admission to, criminal offense of bribery. But I just want to address what you asked, which is what is his team going to do? And the problem we're facing here is, unfortunately, House Republicans.
But filing articles, and this is absolutely crucial to understand, is not the same as actually impeaching someone. It's the beginning of a process, not the conclusion. In addition to this presidential impeachment effort, several other completely separate initiatives have been launched against individual cabinet members. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has faced proposed impeachment articles from some lawmakers who question his military background and conduct in office. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been targeted by impeachment efforts focused on his controversial vaccine views and public health positions. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has been the subject of impeachment inquiry proposals.
Are mistaking their role. They're acting like they are Trump's team, like they're his criminal defense attorneys, and instead they took an oath to the Constitution of the United States to defend and uphold it against enemies, both foreign and domestic. And so Trump needs a real team, and we need the House Republicans to meet the moment and find their courage here, because when the facts come out before the American people, they are not going to look very good. One more thing to say is, those who have worked as the president's personal lawyers before have not fared that well. As we know, Michael Cohen right now is serving out a sentence in federal prison. And we have not heard much from Rudy Giuliani, who seems to be involved in a criminal conspiracy around this Ukraine quid pro quo.
Well, that's
matter.
the question at this point. Does Giuliani look more like a co-defendant than someone who can wage an actual legal defense? Before I lose you, given your work in white-collar crime and your expertise in these areas where things can get complicated, and you say, God, how do you explain to a jury, in this case, the Senate would become the jury,
related to border policies? These are individual lawmakers, often acting alone or in small groups, proposing individual impeachment efforts against individual cabinet members, each effort based on completely different allegations involving completely different facts, and having absolutely nothing to do with any of the other efforts. They are disconnected political statements, not a coordinated movement. The viral videos that have been spreading across YouTube, TikTok, and every other social media platform have taken these separate, disconnected efforts and woven them together into a narrative that simply does not exist in reality. They present John Larson's impeachment filing against Trump as if it were part of a broader cabinet removal plan, completely ignoring that Larson's articles are focused exclusively on the president, not his cabinet. They treat individual proposals against individual cabinet members as if they were all filed simultaneously as part of a single, coordinated effort, when in fact, they were filed at different times by different lawmakers for different reasons. They present the act of filing articles as if it were equivalent to actual impeachment, completely ignoring that the full House of Representatives has not voted on any of these proposed articles. And without a House vote, there is simply no impeachment whatsoever. The constitutional reality of the impeachment process is something that these viral videos conveniently ignore or deliberately misrepresent in ways that serve their dramatic narrative but fundamentally misinform their viewers. Impeachment is not something that happens automatically when someone files articles. It's not something that can be accomplished by a single lawmaker or even a small group of lawmakers acting independently. The process requires the full House of Representatives to vote on the proposed articles of impeachment. And only if a simple majority of the House votes yes, does impeachment actually occur. Even then, impeachment is merely the formal charging of a federal officer with misconduct, the equivalent of an indictment in the criminal justice system. It is not removal from office. Removal requires a separate process entirely, a trial in the Senate, followed by a conviction vote, and conviction requires a 2/3 supermajority of the Senate to agree. Understanding the current political composition of Congress makes the likelihood of any successful impeachment or removal effort even more remote than the constitutional hurdles already suggest. The Republican Party currently controls both chambers of Congress, holding majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. This means that any impeachment effort against a Republican president or his cabinet members faces not just the constitutional hurdles of the impeachment process, but the very practical political reality that the party in power can simply vote down these proposals. Republican leadership can, and almost certainly would, instruct their members to vote against any impeachment articles, ensuring that they fail to achieve the majority needed for impeachment. Even if, somehow, articles pass the House, the Senate trial would require a 2/3 supermajority for conviction, which would require dozens of Republican senators to vote against their own party's leadership, a scenario that is extraordinarily unlikely in the current political environment. The history of cabinet impeachment in the United States is another factor that these viral narratives completely ignore. And understanding this history is essential for putting the current situation in proper context. Cabinet impeachment is extraordinarily rare in American history. The last cabinet member to be impeached was Secretary of War William Belknap, and that was all the way back in 1876, nearly a century and a half ago. In the entire history of the United States, only a handful of cabinet members have ever faced impeachment, and even fewer have been convicted and removed from office. The constitutional process for removing cabinet members is exactly the same as for removing a president, requiring a majority vote in the House for impeachment and a 2/3 supermajority in the Senate for conviction. This is an incredibly high bar to clear, which is precisely why cabinet impeachment is so rare and why the claim that multiple cabinet members face imminent removal is so deeply misleading. The viral videos claiming coordinated cabinet removal are also deliberately blurring the distinction between impeachment and the 25th Amendment, two completely separate constitutional processes with different requirements and different pathways to potential removal. Representative Larson, in addition to filing impeachment articles against the president, also called on the cabinet to consider invoking the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from office. But calling for something is not the same as actually doing it. The 25th Amendment requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president unable to perform his duties. This is a process that cannot be initiated by Congress, cannot be initiated by a single congressman, and requires action from the vice president himself. Vice President J.D. Vance has given absolutely no indication that he would be willing to initiate such a process, and the cabinet has not acted on Larson's call in any way. Viral videos treating Larson's statement as if the 25th Amendment process has actually begun are fundamentally misrepresenting what has occurred. The timeline of these events is another area where viral videos deliberately manipulate information to create a false sense of urgency and imminent action. The events described in these videos, Larson's impeachment filing, the individual cabinet member proposals, all of these happened weeks ago. They are not new developments that just occurred overnight. The viral headlines that claim "just in" are referring to events that have been public knowledge for some time, presented as breaking news to create a sense of immediacy and urgency that simply does not exist. Even if every single impeachment effort described in these videos were to move forward at maximum speed, the constitutional process would take weeks or months to unfold. Impeachment requires House votes, Senate trials, and supermajority agreements. This is not something that happens overnight, and the idea that the entire cabinet could be removed in a matter of days or weeks is constitutionally impossible. The deliberate confusion between filing articles and actually impeaching someone is perhaps the most fundamental deception in these viral videos. Filing articles of impeachment is a relatively routine political act. Throughout American history, lawmakers from both parties have frequently filed articles of impeachment against presidents and other officials they opposed. These filings are often political statements meant to demonstrate opposition, to pressure the administration, or to energize the political base. They are not, in and of themselves, evidence that impeachment is imminent or even likely. The vast majority of impeachment filings never go anywhere. They are referred to committees that never act on them, or they are voted down in the full House, or they simply expire at the end of the congressional session. Treating the filing of articles as if it were the same as impeachment is like treating the filing of a lawsuit as if it were the same as a court verdict. It's only the beginning of a process, not the conclusion. The individual cabinet member impeachment efforts that these videos reference are even less significant than the presidential impeachment filing. And understanding why requires looking at the nature of these proposals. The impeachment efforts against Hegseth, Kennedy, and Noem are not broad bipartisan initiatives with widespread congressional support. They are specific proposals from specific lawmakers, often representing the most progressive or anti-Trump elements of the Democratic caucus. These proposals have not been embraced by Democratic leadership, have not been brought to the floor for votes, and have no realistic path to success given Republican control of both chambers. They represent individual lawmakers exercising their constitutional right to propose legislation and express their views, not a coordinated movement to remove specific cabinet members. Treating these individual proposals as evidence of imminent cabinet removal is like treating a single protest as evidence of an imminent revolution. The practical political realities of the situation are also completely absent from the viral narratives. President Trump has repeatedly and publicly defended his cabinet members, praising their work and expressing confidence in their abilities. He has the power to pressure Republican members of Congress to vote against any impeachment efforts, and his influence over his party remains extraordinarily strong. Removing a cabinet member, even if the impossible happened and articles passed the House, would require a 2/3 supermajority in the Senate for conviction. This would require dozens of Republican senators to vote against a president who remains popular within the party and who has significant power over their political futures. The idea that this is likely to happen for multiple cabinet members simultaneously is so far outside the realm of political reality that it borders on the absurd. Yet this is precisely what these viral videos are claiming is happening. The social media environment in which these claims are spreading has created the perfect conditions for misinformation to flourish. The algorithms that power platforms like YouTube and TikTok reward content that generates strong emotional responses. And nothing generates a stronger emotional response than the claim that the Trump administration is about to collapse. These videos are optimized for engagement, designed to be shared, and structured to keep viewers watching through escalating claims and dramatic language. The creators of these videos know that the truth is far less exciting than the fiction they're presenting, but they also know that fiction gets views, shares, and comments in a way that nuanced constitutional analysis never will. This is the fundamental tension at the heart of the viral misinformation crisis. The truth is often boring, but lies are spectacular, and the incentives of the attention economy strongly favor spectacular lies over mundane truths. The actual status of all these impeachment efforts is far less dramatic than the viral headlines suggest. Representative Larson filed impeachment articles against President Trump, but those articles have not been voted on by the full House and have no realistic path to passage given Republican control of the chamber. Individual lawmakers have filed individual impeachment proposals against individual cabinet members, but these proposals are similarly unlikely to advance given the political composition of Congress. There is no coordinated cabinet removal effort, no unified legal basis for removal, no imminent threat to any cabinet member's position, and no realistic scenario in which multiple cabinet members are removed from office simultaneously. What actually exists is a collection of individual political statements from opposition lawmakers, expressions of discontent that have no realistic chance of translating into actual removal from office. The dangerous consequence of these false narratives is that they shape public opinion before the facts can catch up. Millions of people see these viral videos and believe that the Trump administration is in imminent danger of collapse. They form strong opinions based on false claims. They share these claims with others, and they become entrenched in beliefs that have no basis in reality. By the time the truth emerges and the constitutional processes play out in their slow, deliberate fashion, the damage has already been done. Trust has been eroded, public discourse has been poisoned, and the ability of citizens to understand what is actually happening in their government has been fundamentally compromised. This is not a victimless crime. It is an assault on the democratic process itself. The distinction between impeachment and removal is another crucial element that these videos systematically blur. Even if every single impeachment effort described in these videos were to succeed in the House, which they won't, that would only result in impeachment, not removal. Removal requires Senate conviction, and Senate conviction requires a 2/3 supermajority vote, something that has only happened once in American history for a president, and that president was removed only after a lengthy trial and bipartisan consensus. Cabinet members have never been removed through impeachment in the modern era, and the idea that multiple cabinet members could be removed simultaneously is constitutionally unprecedented and practically impossible. Yet, these videos speak of removal as if it were an automatic consequence of filing articles, completely ignoring the constitutional steps that would have to occur between filing and removal. The pattern of Democratic lawmakers filing impeachment articles against President Trump has been ongoing since he took office in early 2025. Various efforts have focused on different issues, including the Iran situation, economic policy, and other concerns. These filings are frequent and represent the ongoing political opposition to the Trump administration, but they are also routine in the sense that opposition lawmakers in both parties have frequently filed impeachment articles against presidents they oppose throughout American history. These filings are often referred to as blanket impeachment efforts, but the term itself is misleading because it implies a seriousness and coordination that these efforts typically lack. In reality, they are individual expressions of political opposition, not coordinated movements for constitutional removal. The impeachment process itself, when properly understood, is a deliberate and carefully constructed constitutional mechanism designed to be difficult to use. The framers of the Constitution intentionally made impeachment challenging because they wanted to prevent the political branches from using it as a routine tool of partisan warfare. They required a majority vote in the House for impeachment and a 2/3 supermajority in the Senate for conviction because they understood that removing an elected official from office is an extraordinarily serious action that should only occur when there is broad consensus across the political spectrum. This is why cabinet impeachment is so rare, why presidential impeachment is so rare, and why the claims that multiple cabinet members face imminent removal are so inconsistent with the fundamental purpose and structure of the constitutional process. The path forward for all of these impeachment efforts is likely to be the same path that previous efforts have taken. They will be referred to committees, they will languish in those committees, and they will eventually expire without ever coming to a floor vote. Even if some efforts manage to get floor votes, they will be voted down by the Republican majority. And even if, against all odds, they manage to pass the House, they would face a Senate trial where conviction would require a supermajority that simply does not exist. The constitutional and political hurdles are so high that the entire effort is essentially doomed from the start, which is precisely why these viral videos have to misrepresent the situation so dramatically to make it seem exciting and consequential. The role of the vice president in the 25th Amendment process is another crucial element that these videos ignore. The 25th Amendment requires the vice president to act jointly with the cabinet, and Vice President Vance has given no indication that he would consider invoking the amendment. The vice president is himself a political figure with his own ambitions and calculations, and the idea that he would initiate a process that could remove the president he serves under is politically implausible in the extreme. Even if the cabinet were somehow to agree to invoke the 25th Amendment, which they haven't, The vice president would have to be the one to initiate the process. And there is simply no evidence that this is being considered. Larson's call for the cabinet to consider the 25th Amendment is just that, a call, not an action. And treating it as if the process has begun is a fundamental misrepresentation of what the 25th Amendment actually requires. The specific allegations against each cabinet member are entirely different from each other, which further undermines the claim of a coordinated removal effort. Hegseth faces allegations related to his military conduct and background. Kennedy faces allegations related to his vaccine positions. And Noem faces allegations related to border policy. These are completely different factual situations, involving completely different legal questions, and being advanced by completely different lawmakers for completely different reasons. There is no unified legal theory, no coordinated strategy, and no single factual basis for removal. The idea that these disconnected allegations somehow form a unified cabinet-wide removal effort is not supported by the evidence, the legal arguments, or any rational understanding of how congressional politics actually operates. The constitutional protections that cabinet members enjoy also make removal extraordinarily difficult. Cabinet members have the right to defend themselves against allegations, to present evidence, to call witnesses, and to participate in the impeachment process. They can also resign voluntarily if they face overwhelming political pressure, though none of the cabinet members mentioned in these videos have given any indication of considering resignation. The president himself can provide political support and protection for his cabinet members, making it even more difficult for impeachment efforts to succeed. The combination of constitutional protections, political realities, and the procedural hurdles of the impeachment process makes the removal of even a single cabinet member extraordinarily difficult, let alone the removal of multiple cabinet members simultaneously. The broader context of American political history is also relevant here. Throughout the nation's history, impeachment has been a political weapon wielded by the opposition party against the sitting president and his officials. These efforts almost always fail, even when they manage to advance to the impeachment stage. Presidents Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump in his first term were all impeached by the House, but none of them were convicted by the Senate and removed from office. Cabinet members have almost never faced impeachment, and the few who did were from the 19th century. The reality is that impeachment is a blunt and rarely successful tool for political opposition, one that requires enormous political consensus to actually result in removal. Claims that multiple cabinet members face imminent removal are not just false in their specifics. They are fundamentally inconsistent with the entire history of how impeachment has actually worked in the United States. The final reality that these viral videos obscure is that the constitutional process is designed to be slow and deliberate, precisely to prevent the kind of rapid, coordinated removal that the videos claim is happening. Impeachment requires debate, committee hearings, floor votes, and if it proceeds, Senate trials that can last for weeks or months. This is not a process that can happen overnight, and the idea that the entire cabinet could be removed simultaneously is not just politically impossible, but constitutionally impossible, given the procedural requirements that must be met for each individual impeachment effort. The framers of the Constitution knew what they were doing when they designed this process, and they deliberately made it difficult because they understood that stability and continuity in governance depend on making removal rare and difficult to achieve. The practical consequence of these false narratives is that they erode public trust in the political system and in the media that reports on it. When millions of people are told that the entire cabinet faces imminent removal and that removal does not happen, they become cynical about the political process and suspicious of all political information. This creates a fertile ground for even more misinformation to take root. As people become more willing to believe dramatic claims that seem to confirm their pre-existing suspicions, the cycle of misinformation feeds on itself, each false claim making it easier for the next false claim to be believed. Understanding the actual constitutional process, the political realities, and the nature of these individual impeachment efforts is essential for breaking this cycle and maintaining an informed citizenry capable of meaningful democratic participation. The consistent pattern of false claims about impeachment and removal during the Trump administration has made it particularly difficult for citizens to know what is actually happening. Over the years, numerous claims of imminent impeachment, removal, or other dramatic constitutional actions have proven to be false. Yet each new claim generates the same cycle of viral spread, public confusion, and eventual disappointment when the predicted event fails to materialize. The current claims about cabinet removal fit this pattern perfectly, generating excitement and engagement, but ultimately resting on a foundation of misrepresentation and constitutional misunderstanding. The challenge for informed citizens is to recognize this pattern and demand actual evidence for dramatic claims before accepting them as true. The legitimate questions that arise from these impeachment efforts, questions about presidential conduct, cabinet member performance, and constitutional accountability, are overshadowed by the exaggerated and false claims that dominate the viral narrative. Reasonable people can disagree about whether President Trump or any of his cabinet members should face impeachment or removal. And those disagreements deserve to be debated on the merits based on the actual facts and legal arguments, not on exaggerated claims that misrepresent the situation for political or commercial gain. The public debate about governance and accountability is undermined when it becomes impossible to separate legitimate constitutional concerns from fabricated narratives of collapse and crisis. The truth, as so often in politics, lies somewhere between the dramatic claims and the reality, but it is a truth that requires careful examination to discover. The role of the Republican majority in both chambers of Congress cannot be overstated when considering the likelihood of any impeachment or removal effort succeeding. Republican leadership has the power to control what legislation and what procedural actions come to the floor, and they have shown no willingness to advance Democratic impeachment efforts. The committee chairs who would have to hold hearings and advance impeachment articles are all Republicans, and they have shown no interest in pursuing impeachment of Republican officials. The procedural control that the majority party holds in both chambers is a massive obstacle to any impeachment effort, and the idea that multiple impeachment efforts could somehow overcome these obstacles is not supported by the reality of how Congress actually operates. The viral narrative of a coordinated cabinet removal is false rep. Larson filed impeachment articles against Trump, and separate proposals target individual cabinet members, but none have passed the House or Senate. The difference between filing articles and actual impeachment and removal is essential to understanding how American governance actually works.